A boy ages out of the system, inheriting a vast property he's told is already gone. But what he discovers in the derelict farmhouse isn't just about land. It's about a grandmother's secret, a brother's betrayal, and the true meaning of home. If you've ever felt lost, like everything was taken from you, hit that subscribe button and stick around. This story is for you. The key felt wrong in my hand. It was too light, too clean. For 18 years, every key I'd ever touched was heavy, institutional brass, attached to a thick plastic wristband or a janitor's jangling ring. This one was small, iron, and filigreed with rust along its teeth. Felt like a secret. Mrs. Davison, my caseworker for the last 4 years, pressed it into my palm with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the smile she used for difficult cases, for final goodbyes. I was a difficult case, and this was the final goodbye. "Happy birthday, Leo," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the sterile white hallway of the St. Jude's group home. The air here always smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. For 216 months, that was the smell of my life. Today, it was the smell of my past. The key was taped to a thick manila envelope. My name was written on the front in a looping, elegant cursive I didn't recognize. "This came for you," she explained, "from your grandmother's estate. It was held in trust until your 18th birthday." My grandmother. The words felt foreign. I had only vague, dreamlike memories of her. The scent of cinnamon and soil, the rough texture of her hands, a low, humming voice that felt like safety. She died when I was 6, a year before my brother and I were separated and sent into the system. My brother, Ethan. He was 4 years older. He was the one who was supposed to look after me. I clutched the envelope. It was heavy, solid. Felt like it contained more than just paper. Felt like it held weight, history. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It's a deed," she said, her professional calm acting as a buffer against the shock I was clearly feeling. "And a letter. Your grandmother, Eleanor Vance, she left you her property." She paused, checking a form on her clipboard. "All of it. Farm, it looks like." Out in the western part of the state, she looked up, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine sympathy crossed her face. "It's substantial, Leo. 1,200 hectares. 1,200 hectares. The number was meaningless. I'd spent my life in rooms that were measured in square feet. My entire world was a twin bed, a shared closet, and a window that overlooked a brick wall. I couldn't picture 1,200 hectares. I could only picture the opposite of here. I pictured open space, silence, a sky that wasn't framed by concrete. For a dizzying second, the smell of bleach was replaced by the phantom scent of pine needles and damp earth. Hope is a dangerous thing when you've been trained not to have it. Feels like a betrayal of the rules. My worldly possessions were in a single black duffel bag at my feet. A few sets of worn clothes, a dog-eared copy of a book a teacher once gave me, and a faded photograph of 2 small boys squinting in the sun. Me and Ethan. That was it. My entire life in one bag. And now this envelope. "Thank you," I managed to say. The words felt inadequate. She had been a constant, a landmark in a shifting landscape of temporary parents and transient social workers. I didn't like her, not really, but I knew her. And in my world, knowing was a form of stability. "There's a bus ticket in your discharge packet," she continued, all business again. "And a check for $200. It's not much, but it's what the state provides. It should get you started." Started on what? A life I had no map for? A future that had, until 10 seconds ago, looked like a rented room in a bad part of the city and a job washing dishes if I was lucky. Now, there was this other thing. This impossible, terrifying thing. 1,200 hectares. A home. I walked out of the front doors of St. Jude's and the city air hit me. It was thick with exhaust fumes and the distant siren's wail. The sun was bright, making me squint. For the first time in my life, there was no one telling me where to go, what time to be back, what I was allowed to do. The freedom was so absolute it felt like falling. I walked a few blocks, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, the envelope clutched in my hand like a shield. I found a small, quiet park, a sad little patch of green surrounded by concrete, and sat on a bench. My hands were trembling as I tore open the envelope. Inside, there was a thick, folded document tied with a faded blue ribbon, the deed, I presumed, and a smaller, more personal-looking envelope. The letter. I opened it first. The paper was thick, creamy, and felt warm to the touch. The same elegant cursive covered the page. "My dearest Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, then you are a man, 18 years old. I am so sorry I could not be there to see it. I am sorry for so much. I picture you, and I see a small boy with his grandfather's serious eyes. A boy who saw things others missed. I hope the world has not taken that from you." I had to stop and take a breath. Her voice was in the words. I could almost hear it, that low, humming sound from the edges of my memory. I read on, my eyes tracing the lines of ink that were a bridge across 12 years of silence. She wrote about the farm. She called it the hollow. She wrote about the ancient oak tree on the west ridge, the cold, clear water of the creek, the way the fog settled in the valley in the mornings. She wasn't just describing a place. She was painting a picture of a sanctuary. "This land is your inheritance, Leo," she wrote. "It is not just dirt and trees. It is a place to be safe. It is a place to put down roots so deep that no storm can pull you up. It is yours. I have made sure of it. I have protected it for you, and only for you. Only for me." The words seemed to exclude someone. "Ethan. Why only me?" The last part of the letter explained the practicalities. The name of a lawyer in the nearby town of Havenwood, a Mr. Abernathy. The location of a spare key to the house. And a final, chilling sentence. "Trust the land, Leo. It remembers everything. It will tell you the truth, if you listen." Tears were blurring the words. Not tears of sadness, but tears of a profound, earth-shattering relief. I wasn't an orphan anymore. I wasn't a ward of the state. I was Leo Vance, and I had a home. I had roots. I had 1,200 hectares of safety. With renewed purpose, I stood up and walked to the bus station. I used the payphone, a relic from another era, much like the letter in my hand, and called the lawyer's office in Havenwood. The receptionist was polite but firm. Mr. Abernathy was retired. The practice had been taken over by his son, Mr. Abernathy Jr. He was with a client, but she could give him a message. I left my name and the reason for my call. Then I asked the question that had been a low hum of anxiety beneath the joy. "I'd just like to confirm the status of the property. The Eleanor Vance estate." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "One moment, sir." The silence stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat in the receiver. "Ah yes, the Vance property. Parcel 734. 1,200 hectares." She paused again. "I'm sorry, sir, but our records show that property was sold 6 months ago." The world tilted. The bus station noise faded to a dull roar. "Sold? No, that's not possible. It was left to me. In a trust." "I understand, sir," she said, her voice softening with practiced pity. "But the property was sold by the estate's other heir to Northwood Development Corporation. The sale was finalized in March. The transfer was handled by Mr. Ethan Vance. Ethan, my brother, the one who was supposed to look after me. He had found a way. He had sold my home. He had sold my sanctuary. He had sold the last piece of my grandmother I had left." The key in my pocket suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The letter felt like a lie. The hope that had bloomed in my chest just moments before withered and turned to ash. I was standing in the middle of a bus station, holding a key to a house that wasn't mine, a deed to land that had been stolen, and a letter from a dead woman that promised a future that had already been erased. I was 18 years old, and I was once again completely and utterly alone. The $200 check from the state felt like both a pittance and a fortune. It was my only tether to the world. My first instinct was to follow the plan I'd made before the letter. Find the cheapest weekly rental I could, get a job and disappear. Survival mode. It was what St. Jude's had trained me for. Keep your head down, expect nothing, trust no one. Especially not family. Ethan had just carved that lesson into my bones. But my grandmother's words echoed in my head. Trust the land. It remembers everything. It was a crazy thought, a whisper of defiance against the crushing reality. What was I going to do? Walk up to some corporate headquarters and demand my farm back? They'd laugh me out of the building. And yet, the thought of just letting it go, of letting Ethan's betrayal be the final word on my grandmother's legacy, felt like a deeper kind of failure. Felt like letting them win. All of them. The system, my brother, the faceless corporation. I looked at the bus ticket in my discharge packet. It was an open ticket, good for one trip to any destination in the state. Mrs. Davison had probably assumed I'd go to the city's central depot. But the name of the town near my grandmother's farm was right there in the letter. Havenwood. I walked to the counter, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. A ticket to Havenwood, please, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The bus ride was 8 hours of watching the world transform. The dense, vertical gray of the city slowly bled into the sprawling suburbs, which in turn gave way to flat, open farmland. As we moved further west, the land began to roll and swell. Hills appeared on the horizon, dark green with trees. The sky seemed to get bigger, wider, a vast canvas of blue and white that made the cramped, rattling bus feel like a cage. I kept my duffel bag on my lap and the manila envelope pressed against my chest. I didn't sleep. I just watched the land go by. My land, or what was supposed to be my land. With every mile, a cold dread mingled with a strange sense of homecoming. I was a trespasser heading toward a place I'd never been, yet felt I knew. My grandmother's descriptions were so vivid they had planted themselves in my mind. I could picture the oak tree, the creek, the fog. I was traveling not just across the state, but back in time, toward a memory that was more feeling than fact. What was I expecting to find? An answer? A confrontation? Maybe I just needed to see it. To stand on the soil that was meant to be my foundation and feel the loss of it completely, so I could finally let it go and move on. Or maybe, just maybe, I was holding on to that one cryptic line from her letter. It will tell you the truth. The bus pulled into Havenwood just as the sun was setting. It was a small town, the kind with one main street, a blinking traffic light, and a town square with a gazebo. The air smelled different here. Clean, crisp, with an undertone of pine and wood smoke. It was quiet. The silence was so profound it was almost loud after a lifetime of city noise. I got off the bus, the only passenger to do so, and stood for a moment, feeling out of place in my city-worn clothes. The law office of Abernathy and Son was on the main street, a modest brick building with a dark green door. It was closed for the day. According to the map on my phone, which was quickly losing its battery, the Vance property was another 5 miles out of town. Too far to walk with my bag, especially in the fading light. There was one motel in town, a small, sad-looking place called the Sleepy Pine. I used $40 of my precious $200 for a room. The room was small and smelled of stale cigarette smoke, but it was mine. For one night, at least. I laid the deed and the letter out on the worn bedspread. I stared at my grandmother's signature, at the legal jargon I didn't understand, at the plot map that showed the vast, sprawling shape of the hollow. It looked like a giant, protective hand. That night I dreamt of her. It was just a fragment. I was small, standing in a huge kitchen. Sunlight was streaming through a window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She was there, her back to me, humming as she kneaded dough on a floured wooden board. I couldn't see her face, but I could feel her presence, a warmth that filled the entire room. I woke up with the ghost of that warmth still clinging to me. The next morning, I walked to the law office as soon as it opened. Mr. Abernathy Jr. was a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a weary slump to his shoulders, as if he carried the weight of the town's troubles. He remembered my call. He led me into a book-lined office that smelled of old paper and leather. "Leo Vance," he said, sitting down behind a large oak desk. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. Stubborn as a mule, but remarkable." He folded his hands on the desk. "My receptionist told me about your call. I'm afraid the news is correct. Your brother, as the only present and legally accessible heir of age, petitioned the court to act as executor. He sold the property, but the trust, her letter said she protected it for me. I pleaded, my voice cracking. He sighed, a long, mournful sound. She did. She set up a testamentary trust, which only came into effect upon her death. However, there were complications. Your brother argued that the estate was insolvent, that there were significant back taxes owed, and that selling was the only way to settle the debts. He claimed he was acting in your best interest, to preserve some of the monetary value for you when you came of age. Monetary value? Is there money for me? Then, a desperate, foolish spark of hope. Abernathy shook his head slowly. According to the final accounting he filed, after the back taxes, legal fees, and his own executor fees were paid, the estate was left with a balance of 0. I'm sorry, son. On paper, it all looks legitimate. Aggressive, but legitimate. On paper. But what about in reality? What about Northwood Development? What are they going to do with it? From what we hear, they're planning a luxury resort and golf course. They've been buying up land all over the county. He leaned forward. Listen, Leo. I knew your grandmother. She loved that land more than anything. She would never have wanted this. I looked at the paperwork when it came through, and it felt wrong. Too neat. Too fast. But without any evidence to the contrary, my hands were tied. Evidence. The word hung in the air between us. My grandmother's last words came back to me. Trust the land. I need to go there, I said, the decision solidifying in my mind. I need to see it. Abernathy looked at me, his gaze searching. He seemed to see something in my face. Desperation, determination, I don't know. He nodded slowly. The house should still be standing. Northwood hasn't started demolition yet. They're still in the surveying phase. He scribbled an address on a piece of paper. It's down a long dirt road off Route 4. You can't miss the turn. There's an old stone wall. I thanked him and left. I spent another $10 on supplies at the town's general store. A flashlight, a water bottle, some protein bars. Then I walked to the edge of town and started down Route 4. I didn't try to hitchhike. I wanted to walk. I wanted to feel the distance, to feel the ground under my feet. The sun was high and hot, and the asphalt shimmered in the heat. Cars rushed past, leaving me in a cloud of dust. Took over an hour, but I found it. A break in the trees, a crumbling stone wall covered in ivy, and a dirt road that disappeared into the woods. A new, shiny metal sign was hammered into a tree at the entrance. Private property. Northwood Development Corp. No trespassing. I ignored it. I slipped through the gap in the wall and started down the road. The air immediately grew cooler under the canopy of trees. The sounds of the highway faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the call of a distant bird. The road was overgrown, 2 deep ruts with a line of tough green grass growing down the middle. It was clear no one had driven down it in a long time. After another 20 minutes of walking, the trees opened up into a clearing, and I saw it. The house. It was a simple 2-story farmhouse, its white paint peeling to show the weathered gray wood beneath. The porch roof sagged on one side, and several windows were boarded up. It looked tired, abandoned, like it was slowly being reclaimed by the wild fields that surrounded it. But it was still standing, just like she said it would be. Beyond the house, the land rolled away in every direction. Hills, meadows, a dark line of trees that marked a creek, and in the far distance, the blue haze of the mountains. 1,200 hectares. It was more space than I had ever seen. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. I felt a profound sense of trespassing on my own life. I walked up the creaking wooden steps of the porch. The spare key she'd written was under the loose stone at the far right corner of the hearth inside. But the front door was locked. I walked around the house, peering into the grimy windows. The rooms were filled with shrouded shapes, furniture covered in white cloths, like ghosts waiting for a party to begin. Around the back, I found a cellar door, old and heavy, set at an angle against the foundation. A thick chain was wrapped around the handles, secured with a rusty padlock. It looked ancient, But next to it, tucked under the lip of the stone foundation, I saw something else. A small, flat rock that didn't quite match the others. My heart gave a little jump. I pried it up with my fingers. Underneath, nestled in the cool, dark earth, was a key. It was old and iron, just like the one Mrs. Davison had given me. But this one was for the back door. The lock was stiff, but with a hard turn, it gave way with a loud clunk. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of dust, thyme, and something else, something faintly sweet, like dried lavender. I was standing in a small mudroom. A pair of old, mud-caked boots stood in the corner, as if their owner had just stepped out of them and would be back any minute. I moved into the main house, into the kitchen, and I stopped, frozen. It was the kitchen from my dream. The same large wooden table in the center, the same deep farmhouse sink, the same window over the sink looking out onto the fields. Sunlight was streaming through it, illuminating a million dancing dust motes. The furniture was all there, draped in those ghostly white sheets. It was a time capsule, a sanctuary waiting for someone to return. The silence was absolute. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, watchful silence. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I walked slowly into the living room, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floorboards. In the center of the room was a massive stone fireplace. I knelt down, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. I ran my hands along the stones of the hearth. On the far right corner, just as she'd said, one stone was slightly loose. My fingers trembled as I worked it free. It was heavier than I expected. I pulled it out, revealing a small, dark cavity behind it. And inside that cavity was a small, locked metal box. The key Mrs. Davison had given me, the clean, light one, fit perfectly. I lifted the box out and carried it to the window, where the light was better. I took a deep breath, turned the key, and lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, were several more letters, tied with the same blue ribbon as the deed, and a small, leather-bound journal. The top letter was addressed to me. "My Leo," it began in that same familiar script. "If you are here in this house, it means you did not give up. I knew you wouldn't. You have a quiet strength in you, a resilience I pray the world has not broken. I hope you are here for the right reasons. Not for money, but for truth. Because the truth is what I have left for you. The money, I'm afraid, is long gone." I read on, my world shrinking to the words on the page. She explained that she had known, for years, that Ethan was different, that he was impulsive, selfish, and saw the land only for its monetary value. "He has his father's hunger," she wrote, "a hunger for things that can be bought and sold, not things that can be nurtured and grown. I love him, your brother, but I could not trust him with this place. It would have been a betrayal of everything your grandfather and I built." So she had created the trust, specifically to bypass him and give the land directly to me. But she had also known he would fight it. She knew he would try to find a way to take it. "So I set a trap for him," the letter continued, and a cold chill ran down my spine. "A trap made of paper and ink. The back taxes Mr. Abernathy told you about? They are real. I stopped paying them years ago. I let the debt accumulate, knowing it would create a crisis after my death. It would give Ethan the perfect excuse, the perfect leverage to convince a judge that the estate was in peril and that he needed to be the one to save it. He would see it as an opportunity, a problem he could solve by selling. He would think he was being clever." My mind was reeling. She had orchestrated this? She had intentionally created the very crisis that allowed Ethan to sell the land? It didn't make any sense. "You must understand, Leo. A direct fight in court, your word against his, would have been messy and uncertain. He would have painted you as a ward of the state, unstable, unreliable. He would have won. So I gave him an easier path. I let him think he was winning. I let him sell the land to the wolves at Northwood Development. Because the sale itself is the key." I turned the page, my hands shaking. "Attached to the deed you hold is a document called a conservation easement. Your grandfather and I filed it 30 years ago. It covers a 100-hectare section right in the heart of the property, including the creek and the old-growth forest on the ridge. This easement is permanent. It runs with the land no matter who owns it. It legally prohibits any development, any construction, any logging, forever. It is a poison pill, Leo. A poison pill that makes Northwood's plans for a golf course and resort utterly impossible. The land they bought is worthless to them, as long as that easement is in effect. I scrambled for the deed, my fingers fumbling with the blue ribbon. I unrolled the thick document and there, stapled to the back, were several more pages. Conservation easement agreement. It was filled with legal language, but the core of it was clear. A huge chunk of the property was untouchable. Ethan never would have looked for this. The letter went on. He would have seen the tax debt, the total acreage, and the dollar signs. He wouldn't have done his due diligence. And Northwood, in their hurry to snatch up the property for a low price, they may have missed it, too. Or their lawyers told them about it, and they assumed they could get it overturned. They will find out they cannot. So now you have the truth. Your brother betrayed you for money he never got. He sold a property that cannot be used for its intended purpose. And you, my dear Leo, you are standing in the middle of it all. You have a choice. You can take this information to Northwood and use it as leverage. They will likely offer you a settlement, a sum of money to sign away your claim and help them fight the easement. It would be a lot of money, more than you have ever dreamed of. It would be enough to start a new life, anywhere you want. It would be the easy way out. She paused, the ink on the page seeming to hold its breath. Or, she wrote, you can fight. You can use this information not to get rich, but to get your home back. The sale was predicated on the developable nature of the land. It is, in legal terms, a fraudulent transaction, whether your brother intended it or not. You can challenge the sale. It will be a long, hard, expensive battle. You have no money. You have no resources. All you have is the truth, this house, and the name of a good lawyer who knew your grandmother. All you have is what I have left you. The choice is yours, Leo. Do you want the money, or do you want the land? Do you want an easy life, or do you want a meaningful one? I cannot make that choice for you. I can only tell you that this land is more than just property. It is a legacy. It is your home if you still want it. Whatever you decide, know that I loved you. Know that I tried to protect you in the only way I knew how. The letter ended there. I sat on the dusty floor, the papers spread around me, the weight of her love, her cunning, and her sacrifice settling over me. She had seen it all coming. The betrayal, the greed, the legal maneuvering. And she had built me a life raft out of secrets and paper. But it wasn't a life raft that would float me to safety. It was one that would carry me straight into a storm. The silence of the house pressed in. I could feel the presence of the 1,200 hectares outside, waiting, watching, asking me the same question my grandmother had. What did I want? The money or the land? My whole life I'd had nothing. The idea of a large sum of money was intoxicating. It meant freedom, security, a way to finally be safe. I could walk away from all of this, from Ethan, from the past. I could start over clean. But then I looked around the room. I saw the faint outline in the dust where a rug used to be. I saw the small nicks in the wooden windowsill, as if a small child had once played there with a toy. I saw the way the light fell across the floorboards. This wasn't just a house. It was the last tangible piece of my family, the only proof I had that I came from somewhere, that I belonged to something. My grandmother hadn't just left me a legal strategy. She had left me a home. She had trusted me to be the kind of person who would understand the difference. Was I that person? The boy who left St. Jude's that morning wouldn't have been. He was a survivor. He would have taken the money and run. He would have done the practical thing. But standing here, in this house, breathing this air, I felt like a different person. I felt like Eleanor Vance's grandson. The decision settled in my bones, quiet and sure. I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight. I carefully packed the letters and the journal back into the metal box. I left the house, locking the door behind me, and started the long walk back to town. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the road. The world looked different. The trees seemed older, the fields more vibrant. It wasn't just land anymore. It was mine to defend. The next morning, I was back in Mr. Abernathy's office. I didn't say a word. I just opened the metal box and placed the letters and the conservation easement on his desk. He picked up my grandmother's letter first. He read it slowly, his expression shifting from weary sympathy to a kind of stunned admiration. He read it a second time, then let out a low whistle. "Eleanor Vance," he said, shaking his head with a small smile. Good heavens! She was always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He picked up the easement, his lawyer's eyes scanning the dense text. He nodded as he read. "This is ironclad. State registered, properly filed. Northwood's survey team must have been incompetent, or their legal department arrogant. Or both." He looked up at me, his gaze sharp and focused. "You know what this means, don't you? You know what she was asking you to do." "I'm to fight them," I said. "To challenge the sale." "Yes, and it will be a fight. Northwood has deep pockets. They will try to bury us in motions. They will try to intimidate you. They will paint your brother as the victim and you as an opportunist." He leaned back in his chair. "And we have no money for a retainer, let alone a protracted legal battle." The hope that had carried me back to town faltered. "So, it's impossible." "I didn't say that," Abernathy said, a glint in his eye. "I said it would be a fight. My father had a contingency fund set up for cases like this. Cases that were important to the community. Your grandmother was important to this community. And fighting off a predatory developer who wants to turn our countryside into a playground for the rich? I'd say that qualifies." He stood up and extended his hand across the desk. "I'll take your case, Leo. Pro bono. We'll file an injunction to halt any work on the property and a suit to have the sale invalidated on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation." Shaking his hand felt like grabbing onto a lifeline. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Now," he said, "you go home. The injunction will give you the legal right to be there. Go to the house. Live in it. The utilities are off and it'll be rough, but you need to establish residency. You need to show the court that this isn't just a piece of paper to you. It's your home." He handed me a set of keys from his desk. "Your grandmother left these with my father years ago. For safekeeping." The keys were heavy, old brass. They felt real. They felt like they belonged to me. The journey back to the farm was different this time. Abernathy had given me a ride in his old, dusty pickup truck. We stopped at the general store again, and I spent the last of my money on more practical things. Work gloves, buckets, cleaning supplies, a heavy-duty lantern. As we pulled up to the house, the no trespassing sign seemed smaller, less intimidating. "It's going to be hard work," Abernathy said, looking at the dilapidated farmhouse. "The place has been neglected for a long time." "I'm not afraid of hard work," I said, and I meant it. After a life of enforced idleness, of waiting for bells to ring and doors to be unlocked, the prospect of real, physical labor felt like a gift. He clapped me on the shoulder. "I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. Northwood will get the news by tomorrow. Expect a visit." "They won't be happy." He drove off, leaving me alone in the driveway, standing before my house, my home. The first few days were a blur of work. I started by unshrouding the furniture, letting the ghosts out. Dust filled the air, thick and ancient. I swept and scrubbed, hauling buckets of water from a hand pump on a well I found out back. The water was icy cold and tasted of minerals and earth. It was the best water I'd ever had. I found old kerosene lamps and got them working, their soft, flickering light pushing back the deep rural darkness at night. I slept on a dusty old sofa in the living room, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of mothballs. It was the most peaceful sleep of my life. I was exploring the barn on the third day, a huge, cathedral-like structure with light streaming through the gaps in the wooden slats, when a sleek black car came down the driveway. I knew who it was. I walked out to meet them, my hands grimy, my clothes covered in dust. A man in an expensive suit got out of the car. He was slick and polished, a stark contrast to the rustic world around him. He didn't offer to shake my hand. "Leo Vance?" he asked, his voice smooth and condescending. "I'm Daniel Croft, Senior Counsel for Northwood Development. I think you and I need to have a little chat." He got straight to the point. He told me they had received the injunction. He called it a frivolous, baseless attempt to extort money from them. He told me I was a troubled young man being manipulated by a small-town lawyer. He said they would fight this, and they would win, and they would countersue me for damages. I just stood there, listening, my grandmother's words in my head. I let him finish his threats. When he was done, I simply said, "This is my home. I'm not leaving." His polished facade cracked a little, a flicker of anger in his eyes. "Look, kid, let's be realistic. We know about the easement. It's an annoyance, a bureaucratic hurdle we will overcome. But it complicates things. It makes this messy. So here's our offer." He pulled a sleek leather-bound folder from his car. "We are prepared to offer you a one-time settlement of $500,000. You sign this document, drop the lawsuit, and walk away. Forever. $500,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering like a mirage. It was more money than St. Jude's entire annual budget. It was a life-changing, world-altering sum. It was everything the boy on the bus had ever dreamed of. Security, freedom, an escape. "You have 24 hours to accept," Croft said, trying to press the folder into my hand. "After that, the offer is off the table, and we will use the full force of our legal team to crush you." I didn't take the folder. I just looked at him, then looked past him at the old farmhouse, its peeling paint seeming noble in the afternoon sun. I looked at the vast, rolling fields and the dark line of the woods. I could smell the damp earth and the hay in the old barn. I could feel the solid ground beneath my feet. This was real. The money was just numbers on a screen. "My answer is no," I said. Croft stared at me, genuinely shocked. He couldn't comprehend it. In his world, everything had a price. Everyone could be bought. He shook his head in disgust. "You're a fool. You're choosing a pile of dirt and a rotten house over $500,000. You'll regret this." He got back in his car and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust that slowly settled back onto the land. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had made my choice. I had chosen the meaningful life over the easy one. But as the dust settled, another car appeared at the end of the driveway. This one was an old, beaten-up sedan, and my stomach twisted into a cold knot. I knew that car. It was Ethan. He got out of the car, and for a moment, we just stared at each other across the dusty driveway. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. There were lines of stress around his eyes. He wasn't the confident, swaggering older brother from my memories. He looked diminished. "Leo," he said, his voice raspy. "I heard you were here. I had to come." "Why are you here, Ethan?" I asked, my voice flat. I was surprised at the lack of anger I felt. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, hollow sadness. "I heard about the lawsuit," he said, avoiding my eyes, "and I saw the Northwood guy leaving. Leo, you have to take their offer. Please. You don't understand what you're getting into." "I think I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you sold my home from under me." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a desperate, pleading shame. "I didn't have a choice. You don't know what it was like. After Grandma died, there was all this debt, the taxes. The house was falling apart. I was 20 years old, trying to keep it all together, trying to look after you from a distance. The state wouldn't let me have you. I had no money, no job. Selling was the only way to get us out of the hole. I was trying to save something for us. For you." "Save what?" I shot back, a flash of heat finally breaking through the sadness. "Abernathy saw the accounting. There was nothing left. You paid yourself a hefty executor's fee, though." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That was for my time. The paperwork, the lawyers. Leo, it was a mess. I did the best I could." "No," I said, my voice quiet again. "You did the best you could for you. Grandma knew. She knew you'd do it. She wrote it all down. His face went pale. What are you talking about? What letter? She knew you saw the land as money, I said, the words feeling like a judgment handed down from the past. And she was right. You're still doing it. You're here now telling me to take the money. You don't care about the land. You never did. Of course I care about the money, he burst out, his voice cracking with a raw, ugly desperation that was painful to watch. That money could fix everything. I'm in trouble, Leo. Real trouble. I made some bad investments. I owe people money. People you don't want to owe money to. That settlement, a piece of it could solve my problems. And there it was. The truth. It wasn't about saving me. It was about saving himself. He hadn't come here to apologize. He had come here to get me to take the deal so he could get a piece of the payout. The hollow sadness in my chest solidified into something hard and definite. Pity. The land is not for sale, Ethan, I said. It was the calmest I had ever felt in my life. Not for $500,000, and not to save you from your own mistakes. It's over. He stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, as if he was only just now realizing that the little brother he'd always been able to control, the one he'd left behind, was gone. He was looking at a stranger. You would do that? He whispered. You would let me? You would choose this place over your own brother? You stopped being my brother when you signed that deed, I said. Grandma gave me a choice. You, the money, the easy way out. Or this, I gestured to the house, the fields, the sky, the land. I choose the land. He didn't say another word. He just got back in his rusty car and drove away, leaving me alone once more. But this time I didn't feel alone. I felt anchored. I felt the presence of my grandmother, the strength of the old house, the deep, patient power of the 1,200 hectares surrounding me. The fight was just beginning, but I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than thought, that I was already home. And this is where I want to pause for a second, because maybe you've been here, maybe not in a dilapidated farmhouse, but in a moment where you had to make a choice between what was easy and what was right, between letting go of the past and fighting for it. Betrayal from someone you love. It leaves a scar that nothing can completely erase. It changes the architecture of your heart. If you've ever felt that, if you know what it's like to have your foundation ripped out from under you, I want you to know you're not alone. The story isn't over when the betrayal happens. That's just the beginning of the story of how you fight back. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to make a choice like that. Your story matters. Now let's get back to the farm. The weeks that followed Ethan's visit were the hardest and the best of my life. The legal battle began in earnest. Abernathy was right. Northwood's lawyers tried to bury us. They filed motions to dismiss. They requested endless depositions. They tried to portray me as a delinquent trying to cash in on a technicality. But Abernathy, despite his small-town demeanor, was a bulldog. He countered every move. And the conservation easement was our rock. It was undeniable, a fact of law they couldn't argue their way around. While the lawyers fought, I worked. I poured every ounce of my energy into the farm. I read through my grandmother's journal every night by lamplight. It wasn't just a diary. It was a manual. She had recorded everything. Planting cycles, notes on soil composition, sketches of the forest, details about the creek's flow in different seasons. She had left me a blueprint for how to care for the land. I started in the house, cleaning and repairing what I could. I learned to patch a roof from a book I found in the town library. I learned how to reglaze a window. My hands, once soft and pale from an indoor life, became calloused and strong. I found a rhythm in the work, a peace in the exhaustion at the end of each day. The community of Havenwood, slowly, began to take notice. At first, I was just a curiosity, the ghost in the old Vance place. But people saw the lights on at night. They saw the smoke curling from the chimney when the weather turned cold. An old farmer named Gus, who owned the neighboring property, stopped by one day. He was a man of few words, with a face as weathered as the bark on an old oak. He looked me up and down, looked at the work I'd done on the porch and just grunted. "Your grandmother was a good neighbor," he said. If you need a hand, you ask. He started leaving things on my porch. A box of fresh vegetables from his garden. A jar of homemade preserves. One day, a chainsaw appeared, with a full tank of gas. There was no note. I used it to clear the fallen trees that had blocked the old path down to the creek. The people of Havenwood were like the land itself. They didn't give up their trust easily. But once they did, it was solid and real. They had loved my grandmother, and they saw her in my refusal to sell, in my stubborn fight to stay. The real breakthrough came from the journal. Tucked into a pocket in the back cover was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It was a letter, but not from my grandmother. It was from a geologist. It was a water quality report for the creek, dated years ago. The report noted that the creek, which originated from a spring deep within the property, was a primary source of fresh water for the aquifer that supplied Havenwood and the surrounding farms. The conservation easement protected the creek, but this letter proved why it was so vital. Abernathy's eyes lit up when I showed it to him. "This is it, Leo," he said, his voice charged with excitement. "This isn't just about preserving a pretty forest anymore. This is about the town's water supply." Northwood's plan for a golf course would involve immense amounts of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. If those were to leach into the aquifer, it would be an environmental disaster. We had our weapon. It was no longer just my fight. It was the town's fight. Abernathy presented the report at the next town council meeting. The mood in the room shifted from passive support for my cause to active, angry defense of their homes. Gus, the quiet farmer, stood up and spoke, his voice rumbling with authority. He talked about how his well had never run dry, not even in the worst droughts, because of the Vance Hollow. Other farmers stood up and agreed. Northwood had underestimated us. They saw a lone orphan and a small-town lawyer. They didn't see the community. They didn't see the deep, interconnected roots that held this place together. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. Corporate developer threatens Havenwood's water suddenly. We weren't on the defensive anymore. They were. The pressure mounted. Northwood's public image was taking a beating. Their investors were getting nervous. The prospect of a long, ugly, and very public fight over poisoning a town's water supply was not what they had signed up for. Their lawyer, Daniel Croft, requested a meeting. This time it was in Abernathy's office, not on my driveway. He was a different man. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary pragmatism. The fight had been knocked out of him. "My clients are prepared to nullify the sale," he said without preamble. "They will return the deed to Mr. Vance. They recognize that the property is not suitable for their development goals." It was that simple. No grand courtroom showdown. No dramatic victory. Just a quiet, tired surrender. They had run the numbers and realized it was cheaper to walk away than to fight a battle they were now guaranteed to lose. Abernathy handled the details. The paperwork was signed. The deed, my deed, was officially and irrevocably mine. I walked out of the law office into the bright afternoon sun, feeling not triumphant, not victorious, just quiet. I had won. My grandmother's plan had worked. I had my home back. I walked the 5 miles back to the farm. When I got to the dirt road, I saw the Northwood sign was gone. I walked down the path, the familiar rustle of leaves greeting me. When I reached the clearing, the house stood waiting for me, solid and real against the blue sky. It looked less like a tired, old building and more like a patient guardian. I spent the rest of the day just walking the land. I went to the West Ridge and stood under the ancient oak tree my grandmother had written about. Its branches were thick and gnarled, spreading out like a protective arm over the valley. I walked down to the creek, the source of all the trouble and all the salvation. I knelt and splashed the cold, clear water on my face. It was real. It was mine, not to own but to care for. I was a steward, not a landlord. That was the legacy she had left me. In the months that followed, life settled into a new kind of normal. The challenges were immense. The farm was a full-time job and it paid nothing. Gus taught me how to mend fences. The librarian taught me about crop rotation. Abernathy helped me apply for grants for sustainable agriculture and forest restoration. Piece by piece, with the help of the community I had inadvertently rallied, I began to bring the hollow back to life. I never heard from Ethan again. I sometimes wondered what happened to him, if he ever solved the problems he was running from. I hoped he had. I found I couldn't hold onto the anger anymore. It was too heavy a burden to carry in this new life I was building. He was a part of my past, a scar that would always be there, but he was not a part of my future. One evening, about a year after I first arrived, I was sitting on the porch I had rebuilt with my own hands, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was cool and smelled of freshly cut grass. I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. I had nothing and I had everything. I had no money in the bank, but I was the richest man I knew. My grandmother had asked me to choose between an easy life and a meaningful one. And in the end, I learned they are rarely the same thing. The meaning wasn't in winning the fight. It was in the fight itself. It was in the work, the struggle, the connections I had forged with the land and the people who depended on it. She hadn't just left me a farm. She had left me a purpose. She had given me a way to reclaim not just my inheritance, but myself. And that's the real lesson here, isn't it? Our true inheritance isn't always something you can find on a deed or in a bank account. Sometimes it's a lesson. Sometimes it's a strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes it's a community that rallies around you when you decide to stand for something. Home isn't just a place you own. It's a place you build, a place you defend, a place that makes you who you are. So I want to ask you one last time, what's the inheritance you're fighting for? It doesn't have to be land. It could be a family tradition, a moral principle, a dream you refuse to let die. Whatever it is, I hope you choose to fight for it. I hope you choose the meaningful path. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if it made you think about your own journey, please subscribe and become a part of this community. You are not alone in your fight, and your story deserves to be heard.